in the filmmaking side, like what's
Yeah.
that been like? Like what's some cool projects you worked on? What's some stuff you got, that you've done in the last few years or something you're proud of?
I got involved in a documentary called Spellers in 2019, 2020, like right during the period that I was leaving. And it was a film about advocating for the communication rights of non-speaking autistic kids. And that really got me thinking, because I was the editor on that project, if there's a way for film to really make an impact, it would be through something like this.
You want to tie this into something entrepreneurial.
Let's do it.
Tell the story. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Barndo Show. Super excited for today's guest. So, man, Evan, why don't you take a minute and just tell everybody like a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Evan Rogers, filmmaker, entrepreneur out in Greenville, South Carolina. Still crazy to say that. It's still kind of fresh. I've been out here almost 4 years now, from Los Angeles originally. Started in film out there as an editor and worked kind of through a couple different companies. Started in broadcast, then moved to more of the commercial side. My last dwellings was Santa Barbara, and it was barely a dwellings for us. It was a little 400 square foot place that we were paying $2,500 a month for, and I started realizing that a lot of my aspirations were elsewhere and just ready to leave. And me and my wife had both gone to college there and just stayed in the area. Had a friend that moved out here, and you were saying it before we got on, just the hub of energy here with entrepreneurship is untapped, and it's really easy to get into. And that's where I am today. And I've developed multiple businesses here. One of which is my rental company, film rental company, that started off of a meetup that me and my buddy started, Greenville Film Society. And I'm now also developing TEDx Unity Park, which has been a pretty cool IP to kind of license and harness. And we did one earlier this year. Excited to kind of roll that out. It's just the community here is hungry for stuff, and that's pretty cool. The demand's there. I know you guys know that.
Oh, 100%. Well,
Yeah.
First of all, man, welcome to God's country.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And then, that's wild. I think some people in their mind have a preconceived notion about people based off geography.
Yeah.
And it's not true.
Mhm.
It's geography based off geography is way different. But talk about that dynamic. Like you in LA,
Mhm.
you're in the hustle and bustle. We were talking about it like, it's a different world. And then you get to Greenville. What was that like? The first few months, first couple years, like what's it been like to just a cultural shift?
Big.
But probably you went through some of the same things about the people. It's I think there's a different way of life, but the people are kind of the same,
Yeah, I think the biggest difference for me coming out here was I had a friend who moved here from Orange County in California, I think he was near Anaheim or something around that area. Once you get south of LA, you do start getting some similar values to out here.
Right.
Just leave and get away like about an hour, and it's different.
Right.
But I think for me it was more of a priority to make a life move over a work move.
Right.
We chatted about that a little bit. I think the potential for me to be better on the personal level across the board here was more apparent to me. Once I started meeting people from here or people that were here, we were just kind of welcomed in really, really openly by people we'd never met before. There's a couple moments where we're out in public and people approached us and gave the Southern hospitality thing to us, eating mostly at restaurants.
Yeah.
But, man, that was cool. I felt really, it's not usual to get that in LA when you're downtown or, when you're around. I lived in Burbank, California growing up. My dad was in the studios, so I kind of got acclimated to all that. And it's different. It's a different lifestyle. You're commuting everywhere. Here has a small little base. and it's easy to get downtown. We were in an apartment like 5 minutes from Floor Field, like right down at the heart of Greenville, and that was like the best experience for us. And it really did show us the type of people that are here. But I think there's a stigma with the South that bothers me now that I've been here long enough to notice that that people out here maybe not be educated. They're not smart enough to start a business. They're not smart enough to do this, that, and the other. They work in the country only and all this stuff. I never felt that way. But then once I was here, I was like, it's really obvious. There's actually more talented people here, in my opinion. You said that earlier. It's a pocket for this crazy amount of growth here. That's very cool. The transplants that come here embrace that, which is very cool. And then they try to leave a stamp, I think, for not just themselves, but others. That kind of other-centered thing is pretty cool out here. Whether or not you're of faith or anything, it doesn't. Right. Because people also think that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well, so if you drink sweet tea, you're gonna.
It's over.
Yeah. You're never leaving. So.
I love that.
But no, man, like it's kind of wild. So you came from that area of things, and we were talking a little bit about like tech, and you're in film and all these things. So like you were there.
Mm-hmm.
You're like in the heartbeat of those industries, and then you come to Greenville, and know it. And I know 100% what it was. Like, even if you didn't tell me,
what was it? I want to hear it.
It's personal. It's the personal life aspect of it.
Yeah.
You were talking about in California. First thing people want to know is like, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all that matters.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody cares about what you want. And that is the biggest dynamic shift of realizing like you're a human being, not a human doing.
That's right.
And so like there is an element of family that's sacred here. There's an element of a life worth living that's here, and it's more rooted in who you are than what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I could imagine like I grew up that way, but like, but I'll give you this example. That hinders some people from entrepreneurship here because it's far-fetched. Here it's, be home by 5 and be at the kids' ball game and all that. And you want to do that, but it's almost like here they build a fence to make you think that if you chase something, you're going to sacrifice those things. And you may for a season, but you can kind of control that if you're building something that's scalable. And, it really boils down to the person. It's not the process, it's not the product, it's not the business that does that. It's the personal decision to do that.
100%.
And I think so. I think it's two sides. Like there, it's expected. Here, it's almost feared. But when you find those people here, to where you're like, here, there's smart people doing big things. I think it's because it's such a small fractional percentage of the ones that are the crazies that actually go out and pioneer something, and you're seeing the best, and it's a smaller playing field, and so everyone looks really elite versus out there, everyone's trying that, and so you have a mixed basket of people that.
But that's how you started this. That's how I would respond to that is, why would you want to be in a pool like you talk about the film industry? So leaving the film hub of the world, really there, right? I remember from my dad, it was weird for a little bit because he was like, well, you want to get into this industry, or stay in it. Because I never unionized and went the studio route. So that was one of the options I had before I left. So about 4 years ago. And it never appealed to me because I just felt like something about it wasn't connecting with me. And also the being present part is really important because people will out there sacrifice to not be present, thinking, here's the challenge for me, thinking, okay, if I do this from age 20 to 45, 50, I can retire and be present with my kids. I don't know, that mindset just doesn't work anymore. I mean, it's very clear, and part of what caused us to have, a thought of moving was COVID. And COVID's what decentralized the entirety of the film industry and media as a whole. I mean, look what we're doing right now. I mean, this is the way to develop business nowadays, is people listen on the phone more than they do anything else. And I think most of advertising went there. So for me, I'm like, well, why would I go to the studios and do the studio system if big Hollywood movies are not really the main draw? and ads and marketing and all that stuff are more of the draw. So for me and a bunch of filmmakers like me now, there's this middle like through line that we all found that's just completely unique to what was being offered, because it is what you said. Out there, it's a challenge because a lot of times the studio system has been seen as the only way to actually make good quality filmmaking. But since I've moved, I've been able to like really to develop projects that I wouldn't have been able to do out there, or start a rental house that there's hundreds of rental houses out there. I've started one of, if not the only one here, Greenville Film Rentals. Somehow got that IP. I mean, that's the thing to me where I'm like, why wouldn't I want that and a better lifestyle? It just makes sense when you think about it more. It's a huge jump. No one in my family ever left Cali except for me. Maybe for college, like my cousin left for college and all that stuff. But my small family, I've had, grandparents that immigrated there and they stayed, and I was the first one to leave. Everybody thought I was crazy. Now my parents bought a house out here. My grandparents bought a house out here. So
Yeah.
hopefully just being a part of the change is good, right? Like just that doesn't mean that everything has to leave there. Like I want to make that clear. It doesn't mean that I don't still go out there once a quarter or more. I do a lot of business out there still, but I hope to pull people to see what the Southeast has. Atlanta has a lot of it. Tennessee's getting a lot now. Nashville. Dr. Phil moved his entire operation out of the CBS studios to Texas. So like things are changing. That's all I'm saying. And I want to be a part of good change. It's part of what you guys are doing too. You can operate fully out of this area.
Mhm.
People don't think you can, but that was my experience,
No, you definitely can. And South Carolina is a unique place for business anyway. So no, that's wild, man. So talk about filmmaking. Like that's unique to me. Like I don't know nothing about filmmaking. I love it. I love creative. I love seeing it. And people will ask us sometimes, like we'll spin off some kind of piece of content or something. They're like, man, that was so good. Like, how did y'all come up with that? Like, we didn't. We went and found those people, and they came up with it. And that's the secret. Is like I think in entrepreneurship, people get this like isolated viewpoint of I've got to do everything. And if you do that, you're going to be really sensational at something.
That's right.
And everything else, you're going to be lackluster.
Mhm.
And so if you go into it thinking like, I don't need to do this, I need to find the people that are the best at this and get them to do it, you will get the return and the result you're looking for. But in the filmmaking side, like what's that been like? Like what's some cool projects you worked on? What's some stuff you got, that you've done in the last few years or something you're proud of?
Sure. Well, I think that goes to the point I was talking about earlier, where you really, for guys like me, you have a split of what's possible. So you could get a non-union movie at a certain point, and it's a feature film narrative. Those do come up every once in a while, or short films. You've got the commercial side, which commercial is definitely still the best funded, but it's changed. COVID changed that landscape. So when you watch the Super Bowl now, the Super Bowl ads, the best ads are often not the broadcast ads, or they're on broadcast, but they're specially formatted for the phone because their ad buy is better on socials now. So that's interesting to me too. And I still do a good bit of commercial, but the challenge is trying to blend a lot of those things together. And one of my main ways that I do that is documentary. That's been a huge side of my passion. And I got involved in a documentary called Spellers in 2020, like right during the period that I was leaving. And it was a film about advocating for the communication rights of non-speaking autistic kids and their ability to, it's called Spell to Communicate, where they point on a letterboard for the words that they're trying to form because they can't speak. And that really got me thinking, because I was the editor on that project, and it got me thinking about, so if there's a way for film to really make an impact, it would be through something like this, right? Because you're developing a project that actually advocates for people, one, which I think is really cool. And that could be taken a bunch of different ways. It doesn't have to be in the disability category or people less, quote unquote, less fortunate by society, right? Like it could be in any way. It's a good way to structure how to do commercial, all that stuff. But I thought about if I could make an impact with this, and me putting myself in their seat, really putting myself in these kids' seat to edit this project, that'd be the best form and way to do it. And just that whole process taught me so many things. We took it to the Phoenix Film Festival. It won Best Doc, which was really cool. And seeing the runoff from that for me was like, okay, I can develop a format that works. And now my brain is only about formatting. And that's where my producer gene comes through, because really it's about trying to adapt and create formats for people, and projects and stories that can be not reused but adapted, because you don't want to start fresh every single time. And so that's been a big part of my development journey. That was a project I got brought on to do, but then took that into a short doc about Sunbar, which is downtown Greenville. Downtown, it's the only dim sum restaurant, and it was a cool journey for KHAILING, who created it, and me and Rio Oshiro, who worked on the project together, developed it, and we took that to a James Beard Award. Very similar formatting, and now that's being developed even further to other things, and a lot of things have come up from it. So it's the same thing that you said earlier. I mean, it's all about making something when people are not watching you make it as a filmmaker. Nobody knows what I'm developing right now, but I've got stuff that only makes what those other two were like way bigger in my head, way more of a challenge. Because if we're not growing that way, I mean, I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. And that opens the door for so much commercial off of that. Because you can you could develop commercial campaigns off of those type of projects. And I'm doing that with the food project right now. I have lots of different things that came up after the James Beard Award that are commercial campaigns, partnered with organizations and different things like that that want to promote off of good stories. So there is still a need for it. I know that socials have kind of changed it and the quality has dimmed a little bit, but you said it earlier. I mean, the value for a big company or agency to hire the right crew and actually spend for it, it will make them money in the long run if it's very directed at the right, whatever the conversion is that they need. But story can play into that too. So it's a nebulous.
Well, I mean, first of all, you left the hub, came to Greenville, and then you had two massive successes there that are. I mean, that's amazing, right? To win Best Doc and then James Beard Award, like that's a big deal.
Living here,
that's what I'm saying. Like I love it. I love like when something seems like a wall. And then you're just like, cool, let's climb it. And that kind of tenacity, I think, is what it takes to get there. But talking about spellers, right? Well, I'm going to be partial to it because I got a special needs daughter. And though she's not nonverbal, when we adopted her, she was. And they told us she'd never speak. And I think my wife needed a daughter as bad as the daughter needed a mom. And so my wife spent so much time in therapies and everything else. They told us she'd never walk or talk. She does both.
Wow.
She's a blessing from God beyond measure. And, like even now we joke like, we prayed for this, like when she's popping off like a teenager, now she's globally delayed. She has autism and she's got in cerebral palsy. So she's got some things working against her, but her life is way different than they anticipated it to be. And that changed me. You celebrate things that most people take for granted. And, you talking about like that perspective of, framing that up from that perspective of the, like, how did that change you? Like,
well, I mean, it's what I was saying where I had to it's such a long process. It took us 3 years to develop. So it was on, a lot of documentary filmmaking. People, any of my film homies laugh at this, but it really does take time. And I feel so bad. Like, even if it's a documentary short, I mean, it took us 2 years to do the James Beard thing. It was only like 18 minutes long. It's not that much. Spellers is an hour and 25 minutes. So that one had some legs, or an hour and 21 or 2. I think that's where I felt it the most was in the edit bay. Those were dark days for me. I mean, I don't think I've ever, besides, this happened a little bit after moving. When I was moving out of LA, those were definitely the darkest days for me. I definitely felt like, God had to open up a big door for me to like start climbing my way out of mental health issues and all that stuff, just from being in a startup situation that was not healthy for me. And I think I was just in the wrong role, honestly. Right. But, similar feeling was working on the project. And when I actually dug deep into the project, not just, there's a huge difference in editing. Like, you can surface dwell for a while and get familiar. That's a huge part of it. Getting familiar is massive with your footage and knowing what generally the stories are, right? We followed probably 12, 13 kids. So, I mean, it's a lot of stories, and which stories are not valid. Like, you can't say any of the stories are not valid for the longer story, but how do you cherry pick pieces of it? And it was really hard. And the way that we figured out how to do it, and I pitched this to the director, was I watched he had taken some of the footage back and was goofing around with it, and he unintentionally just showed me one section of some footage raw that we watched that he had just shot. He was just giving it to me, and I was out in LA, and it felt different to me because it was sitting watching the kid communicate, and was one of the first times this kid had ever communicated, and it was on camera, and it was incredible. And the mom's, obviously losing her mind, crying and all this. It's incredible. But I noticed the pacing was really different. And normally we're trying to cut, chop things away and not let people just sit with the moment. But that showed me that you could. And for me as an editor, I felt really connected to those kids because I had to know I knew pretty much everything they said throughout the entire, I don't know how many hundreds of hours of footage we had. But what are the best bites from these kids that are them saying? And he said something like, or not him, but one of the other kids said, I've been locked in a silent cage my whole life. This is the first time I've ever been able to express myself. I didn't know what I was going to do, and they're 15, 16 years old. So when you're hearing that all the time, this is where it becomes impact documentary work. It's not just a documentary. Then it becomes, it's not really even a cause. This is just like boots on the ground. This is what's happening for these kids. I don't know, man. I'm talking around it, but it was dark for me. But then once I got to know the kids and see their resilience, I mean, all I'm doing is pushing buttons to really make them, be seen. And they were seen from that. And we had a couple kids that were able to take that method of communication, which was and still is like banned in a lot of places, which doesn't make any sense to me in the schools. But they were able to take that to Congress and got a couple states to actually, reform and let them use it in classrooms. And because otherwise it's a special needs room.
What do you think they would ban it? Like,
I don't know. It's really hard to not get political about it, but it doesn't make any sense to me.
I live this world, and I've said in these meetings, and I've seen these things, and from my perspective, I have bias. It's bias.
Yeah, it is bias.
And I think when you're inside of it, you can't not be biased. And the problem is you can't be unbiased to it as an outsider when it's talking about someone's way of life. And my daughter, like, it would take you a minute to realize she's got special needs. If you just saw her, you would just be like, okay, it would depend on what she was doing, but like, you wouldn't just immediately think anything.
Right.
You pulled up at my house. I got 7 kids at home. They'd be running in the yard and riding bikes and doing things, and you would just be like, "Oh, look at the kids!" And like, but if you spend a minute with her doing anything that should be a normal function, you'd very quickly be like, "What's going on here?" And I remember when we put her in school, they were like, "Oh, she'll do great. We'll just put her in the regular track and." And I was like, no, that is not like, no. And we had to fight because there's like this outside unbiased group that wants to say, no, you can't discriminate and do these, solo classrooms and stuff like that. Like, they need to just be integrated into the whole thing. And I'm like, that's not what's best for them. That makes you feel some kind of way. You feel like you're championing a cause. You're destroying an opportunity for her. She's not going to learn the same way. She can't behave the same way. And we figured it out in kindergarten. She went to a normal pre-K, and literally like the 3rd day, the teacher's like, this is going on, and we're like, duh.
What do you expect?
And it was disheartening because we were like, as a parent, you really want your kid to have the best version of life as well. And then you feel bad because there's a stigma to providing the resources for them because it's self-containment and all these things. And I'm like, but that's what we want.
Yeah.
And they're trying to dismantle it. And like, so to hear that, it's like,
it gets you, right?
It hits something deep inside of me because I know the people making those decisions don't know what they're talking about.
Well, and that's where like from all of our footage, and basically after the Phoenix Film Festival win, we had some connections with some networks and got a whole series funded after, which we just finished.
That's awesome.
And it's basically spinoffs of some of these themes. One of them's school system. So what we challenged in that was, you know, the systematic approach from a lot of schools that are, you know, just government run, that probably are just following the X's and O's of what they have to do and not being as adaptive, because you have the challenge when you have anybody that's on the spectrum, there is going to be some adaptation. That's how they live their life. They're trying to figure out how to even process. I've spent so much time with these kids now. I know them really well. Like, these are full functioning, amazing individuals that are not given a voice. So now you're getting the catch for what became now my mission as a filmmaker.
And you feel hopeless.
Yeah, you do. I mean, it's, as a parent, I can't imagine. I've spent so much time with the parents. I know how they feel about it. What you're saying is exactly what they say often. But you need that kind of adaptation, and it's hard because a lot of them have to end up being homeschooled, which is not an issue because for them, they're able to get book smart and do all that stuff. But the socializing is always going to be a challenge, always. And so these kids have found a really great community of other spellers that are able to kind of be all together and homies. And a lot of the parents swear that they're like telepathic to each other because they don't even speak, and they're laughing in the hot tub, or like, it's different, but I've had conversations with them where they'll respond to me on the iPad really fast. And now some of the kids are typing both hands. These are kids that couldn't like the brain body disconnect. They couldn't even tell their body to raise the hand and point at a letter. Like, that's where they started. So it's pretty fascinating. The only way I think in the schools for it to really change would be to have an assisted program, which there are some, that let them be in a normal classroom, or at least allow a practitioner to be by their side for a while until they learn how to type. Because if they can type on the iPad and hit respond to something, they're fast enough, they can be just like anybody else. But imagine, you know, the stemming and all the stuff that they have to deal with. They have to work on regulating their body. Sometimes the only way they regulate is by running around crazy, which is what most people see and say, oh, they're not all there, which is what we challenged in the doc. So the ethos of all of that became human rights, really. Like, that's what this whole thing became, was a human rights piece, and not just really freedom of speech piece, not just a disability project, right? Because there are a lot of disability films that go into the biases, and then the biases lose people. We were challenged and tried to challenge our audience by sitting with these kids for a moment. And we really didn't cut around it that much until we got into interviews, but we would just sit just like this, and they would spell. The director would ask them a question, and they would spell and respond. And a lot of times it's something you weren't expecting. And along the lines of these guys have been trapped for a long time. And there's a lot of them that feel like that. And even if they're verbal, there's this unreliable speech thing where they might not be, they'll say the same word a million times, yep. Or they'll say a sentence of like, I want to go to the mall, but they don't actually want to go to the mall, and they'll spell it out to you. I don't listen to what my mouth's saying. I mean, people have no idea how crazy it is. It's crazy.
Like my daughter has limited communication, and like if you say like, how was your day today? Good. What did you eat for lunch? Good. Mm-hmm. And then you'll see like the look, and then she'll think about it, and it might be an hour later, and she'll be like, chicken sandwich. Like, but she's trying to formulate that. And so like that, for me, man, good on you. Good. Like, what an incredible project to highlight something. And it leads me to this. Telling the story. Because people don't know it exists until the story's told. And how hopeless and helpless was it to tell that story if the people that are living it can't even speak? Like, that's what the whole thing is. If you want to tie this into something entrepreneurial,
let's do it.
Tell the story. Mm-hmm. How do you tell your story? And you know, the thing is, like, I think people focus on product.
Yeah, they do.
When they should focus on people.
That's the whole commercial side of my business.
Yeah. If you focus on people, mm-hmm. you're telling a story.
Well, let's talk about what happened post-COVID. That's what happened. So I'm entering this whole space. Thankfully, I know, seriously, so many props to that director. who brought me onto that to do that. Because that opened my eyes to what that could be. But to your point, it's really taught me what I think it's purpose driven. My buddy Teddy Giard always talks about this. It's purpose driven, purpose driven marketing, essentially, right? It's all of they always pinned it at the millennials, but I think it's millennial and Gen Z that's super interested in this impact type work in some sort of way. And I don't think it's just product. Like, I think there is something around like sustainable this, sustainable that. Like, I do think that's great in some ways for sure, right? We're being more conscious of the globe and all those things. That's great. But I also think it's putting on, like you said, the people that believe in that. And if companies can get behind those people instead of just celebrities, maybe you have a mix of both. That might sell product better, but the unknown thing is really challenging. People might look at guys like us and think we're somewhat unknown, but we're making big impact in trying to make big impact, I guess. But why can't there be a blend of both? Like, I hope that the film industry can recondition itself a little bit. I think it's happening right now to start valuing those voices and not the thing that challenges me right now. I'm working on a project up in Asheville about everything that's been going on. It's very draining. It's really hard. I mean, it's super emotional for me right now to be a part of that. It's crazy, but you think about that and you don't want to be putting on unknown voices as victims all the time. And that's what a lot of companies do. I just saw an ad from Home Depot. It's not a bad ad. It's good. But around the military appreciation week and the Army Navy game that just happened. And it was about people, they walked in and paid for those people's mortgage. It's great. It's great. But it's also like, look how great Home Depot is, Yeah. Like I there's got to be a change in that at some point. And I hope that people post-COVID now are thinking about that more than ever. I think they are. I think they are right now thinking about what matters to me, my health. Like, what am I looking into? That Spellers taught me a lot about that. Diet has changed completely and really different on that now because I've learned a lot. Health, mental health, family life. Those are all things that I could get here in the South that I don't know. A lot of people left the South for the reasons you said, where they're tired of some of that structure, but I think it's really important to have, Yep.
The perspective of why you're doing it has got to be bigger than what you want people to think from you doing it. And I'm a giver. Like, there's no doubt about it. I talk about it all the time. And there's a piece of me that wrestles with it because we built this thing, this company, to have an impact. And, the whole thing, impact over income. I needed income. Like, I burnt everything to the ground to create this. Literally lived off nothing. Went all in on this. Was like, I've built and burnt things down, and I've done so many things, but this one thing, I went all in and was like, what would it look like if I gave 100% of me to one thing rather than percentages of me to 10 things? And I really wanted to have a cause, and I did it. And my business partner, he always jokes and says we're like the yin yang. I'm the white side, he's the black side, and I don't think that's true. I think he has a more compassionate heart than I do. He's just more grizzled to some things because we've had different life experiences. And so, like, we're the same age, and there's things he'll look to me at for like advice. Like, I have like some sage wisdom. But it's because my life's just been filled with tons and tons and tons of things, and his has too. And I think you can connect over like tragedy. You can connect over, disenfranchisement and all these different things. And people, you do it, and then you stay inside that box, and you don't ever use it to impact someone else. And, one of the things that we got really passionate about was how, if we say that, right, we want to have impact, what does it really look like? And for us, we decided, like, we're going to donate a percentage of everything we do to something.
Awesome.
And here in the upstate, we partnered up with this Miracle League, and we really involved that. And again, my daughter plays. She started when she was 4. And I've told this story a billion times. I'll save people details, but it was a life-changing moment to see my daughter get to play the game of baseball. And, she had a walker at that point in time, but like, she was supposed to never walk. And she's laughing and having fun and, running these little buddies to death out there in the field and stuff. And she wasn't supposed to ever do any of that. And like, it changed my life. And so I know the lady that runs it, and I'm like, what's funny is the year leading up to this company starting, I called her and I said, I want to be on the board of directors. And she was like, yeah, well, I mean, that's like a big, she didn't know me from Adam. Like, she knew that my daughter played there and stuff, but like, I remember her saying like, you know, it's a big thing. Like, it's a bunch of this and that. And I was like, look, I don't even know what I'm asking for. What I'm saying is I want to make an impact here. And I didn't have anything. Like, I didn't have a shovel to pour into her organization financially, but I was ready to give my time. And then, you know, God just set the deck for me to build this and do it and step into a new identity of who I was, of like what it should look like. Cause I had been inside of massive success, had a lot of momentum in another organization, and my life was miserable. And, you know, everyone's underappreciated. Everything was about the money. Everything was a financial decision. And I was just completely disconnected. And so when we started this, I'll never forget, we were wondering, like, you know, this first year of business, we're generating some revenue. I finally like earned a little bit. I'm making like a third of what I'm used to, but I got some money coming in to like support the family. And I was driving and I was thinking like, we got to do something. And we had donated a little bit of money at that point in time to be a sponsor. And like we'd went out and helped with some games and stuff. And I just left the office on a Friday and literally driving down the road decided I'm going to throw this event, and booked a water park, did this thing. We wrote a check for like a 35 grand or something. And that's a big deal. And like when we wrote that, it was literally everything we had to give. And my partner was like, are you sure you want to do this? And I'm like, if we don't, then this is not what we intended to build.
Right.
And so we did it. And there's a big picture of it on our wall and all that stuff. But I don't think, for me, it's not so much as like, look at what we did, as much as I want people to see the ability to impact above and beyond and make people think what they can use it for. And then, you know, we fast forward a year, much bigger check. Starting in January, I'm on the board.
Nice.
Like, and that's just the way the story works, if you really mean what you say. But I struggle with that. Like the Home Depot ad, right? Like it was good.
It's a great ad.
But it's, look what we did.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, as a creative, think you change the message? Because I genuinely wrestle with this a lot. Like the book Toxic Charity changed my life, and how you do it with dignity and how you do it where people see the impact of it. How do you do it without making it about you?
Man, it's a good one. I think it's being prepared and knowing your domain better than most do that you're going into. You know, I didn't know, because I didn't direct spellers. I was an editor, which is very vital to the process, but also like I didn't know that world. I had to learn that world. I think it taught me what is possible for the future when it comes to learning those environments, to be able to then put a message out. That's first. Second would be, if you go in more focused on your subject and your story over the outcome or what it's going to gain you, it's 100% going to be a different story than one you would tell. The subjectivity of it, like of being very subjective about your approach, is a killer. It does not help anything. It really doesn't. I mean, the entire filmmaking process is about collaboration, 100%. I was just on a shoot where I prepped an interview for 6 days for some big talent, and it got washed right away. And I had my iPad of all my questions I've been prepping all week in research, and I looked down at it, I looked at them, and I closed it and I put it to the side. And I knew at that moment it was more about the first point I made, more about me knowing what the subject matter is better than anybody else there, to be able to pivot like that. And then two, to not make it about me in that moment, make it about 100% the subject. Because that is like, that was my prep. That was what I was going to ask. I felt proud of that outline that I had. But at that moment, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at that moment. You got to pivot for the entire crew. There's a whole crew of 25 people behind me. You know, everybody felt the eyes on the back of my neck because it's big talent. So I was stressing. But then once you get into the edit, this is the third point. When you get into post-production, you have the ability to control where that narrative goes. And you can change it. You can change it to be something for you. Oh man, that soundbite is so good. It makes me look so great. But the second you do that, you lose people. Like you really do lose people. And that's the whole mindset that you have to get in. I did the same thing with Great Wall, the James Beard film. Was in the edit for that. Me and Rio, the director of that, kind of worked together and I brought structure as a producer for him to be able to operate in. But you know, there's a lot of outcomes to where, you know, and potential for where certain things can go. And so it's really hard to narrow down, well, what is the best story? And I think you just have to let that leave you, and you have to just be like, I'm going to put one of the, you know, better messages I can forward. I never know what combination, because there's so many combinations of bites or timing or things that I could put together. But what's the best way that it won't be eyes on me and it's more eyes on the talent? You can control that, and you can control that through technical things too. So I think for me though, like that's bringing it back to being in the Carolinas now. I think there's a chance now to really impact people through putting something out there that hasn't been seen.
Yeah.
It may have been done in the past, but maybe it hasn't been done in a long time. That was the whole TED thing for me and my buddy Kaipo. Was he came to me and he was like, hey, do you want to try doing a TED event? Because you basically apply online and all that stuff, and they vet you real hard. So it's hard to get it. But we ended up getting a license for one, and they chose Unity Park. Unity Park is the newest park in Greenville. It stands for a lot in that community. It's really like the reason they made it was a dividing line there with the river that was historic, you know, poor Black community, and across the river on the other side was the richy rich white community. And from that standpoint, the segregation standpoint, which is still being here, I haven't been able to fully understand it. It really blows my mind that was a thing so hard here. You couldn't really cross over that river for the Black community there. Well, Ted chooses that name, and then all of a sudden for us, it was very, very specific what the mission was going to be, to unify people. And that's kind of what we're talking about right now with film too. I mean, that's an event side of things that I'm trying to recreate an IP like that and get it as close as it's supposed to be. Everybody knows the red carpet and the stage and all, like the circle rug and the logo behind and all that. Like it has its own look, but how do you adapt it and make it your own? And Greenville has let us be able to do that. We had a successful first event, but it's all about unifying people and putting other people's message forward. And to your point, if you do that, it may seem like you're going in the dark creating something new, but if you put other people first, it does end up coming back to you to take care of you in the moments where you feel like I'm really sacrificing a lot here to do this. And you're a family guy. I mean, I'm stoked for that opportunity for me and my wife at some point, but you know, with kids and all that stuff, it's a risk to do what you did. But that's the serial entrepreneurial thing that we do when we're convinced of something. Mm-hmm. But if egos aside, I think it does happen faster. Because if you don't adapt and change and you're only focused on your viewpoint, you're not going to grow fast enough to make that thing a thing. That's what a lot of filmmakers do. They front a ton of cash, their entire savings account, to make a film, which makes no sense to me. Because if you just got a crew to do sweat equity on it, and then everybody gets a percentage on the back end, that would work a lot better. And you'd have an incentivized crew, and you didn't screw up your life. Like you didn't mess up your lifestyle. I think that's really important. So others first is what I look at. You know,
yeah. Well, I think it's intentionality, right? Like if you're an entrepreneur, you have certainty and confidence. And if you don't, you're going to struggle, because you got to make decisions that you don't know the answers to. And you just got to be confident in that decision, right, wrong, and different. It's you're leading someone. Mm-hmm. And if you waver, if you teeter-totter back and forth and show uncertainty, your people are going to feel uncertain. And so, you know, my wife always is like, okay, you know, because like, and that takes time. It takes time. You earn that. You earn the ability of doing things, following through on things to where people will trust you to do it again. But the biggest piece, the combination there, I think, to do it is intentionality. Like you have to be intentional with what you're doing to impact people, because otherwise it's just second rate.
Yeah.
It's second rate.
And investment is the next stage of that. Like I didn't have a concept of investment. My family's very much so you know, admittedly, my family is way more about controlling finances and hard costs and all of that stuff. Like that's just been my grandpa immigrated from Britain during the war, and you know that's what they did. They conserved. So my dad grew up that way, and my mom's side grew up that way. It's just it's the boomer thing, you know, and it makes sense for the times that we're there. But for me, I've done a lot of these sweat equity things that have paid off. And that's something that I hope that a lot of early filmmakers see, or you know, videographers now, they call a lot of them are videographers, that they see that it's okay when you're younger to do projects at half rate. I mean, when I went freelance, I was doing music videos for $200, and that was not going to do it.
Right.
You know, but I built a lead generation through that. And the lead generation grew, and I was able to up my prices, and I was able to get better and better and better and grow a community at the same time. If you're patient with yourself, you're allowed to do those things. That's the thing I don't think people understand. They think that you have to be cash present directly in your pocket right now. Most entrepreneurs are not. They're making the longer investment, and they come back to it.
Well, you have
and
to do.
It does pay off.
You have to do.
Yeah, you have to.
And so your $200 music videos, although it didn't fill your bank, what it did was gave you project after project after project. You got more reps than anyone else. You got more time. You got more time doing what you want to do, and you honed your skills to where you could set the price.
That's right.
And that's the part where people think entrepreneurship, I'm going to be rich. Maybe not. You burn your life to the ground if you go into it for the wrong reasons. And I was guilty of that. Like I said, I built so many companies, and it really hit me the first time when I was sitting in a room. It's 40 dudes in there, all entrepreneurs. And we're all in that room, and the icebreaker is like a 3-day event. Icebreaker, they got this ball with a microphone in it. They're throwing it around the room. You stand up, you say your name, like married, whatever, and then what do you do? I didn't know how to answer that question. I don't know. I didn't have a purpose. I made money. I had money. I didn't have a purpose. I literally, they were like, what do you mean you don't know what you do? Like, you do something. And I'm like, I mean, I do a lot of things, but like, I don't know who it hit me. Like, I don't know who I am. I was 34 years old. Probably successful by most people's definition.
Sure.
And in that room, I had no idea how to answer that question. And that was the light bulb that I needed to be like, I don't like that I don't know how to answer that question. Because I can tell people clearly that I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a this, I'm a that. Like, but like, what do I do? I don't know what I do. And I think that was the fuel for me to burn everything to the ground and go in, because I didn't care about the money, because I had money. I didn't have enough, but I had money, and I just said that didn't do what I think most people, it's like, if I could get there, I'll have all this clarity and all of my problems will be solved, and that's not real. There's a bigger calling. Who am I? That's a hard question to answer. And if you don't have an answer, it's a weird place to be. And so, like, immediately I shrunk in that room. And then, like, from there, I grew to where I got respect in that room, and like I've got connections in that room, and like those people like see me, and like, I mean, it was just a wild spot in my life, and from it was born this incredible concept that, like,
so rad.
Yeah, and what's fun is like it was born as Barndo Co, but I never built a barn. Like, my partner did. I mean, there's some circumstances where I was on the job, but I don't build barns, and like, I was like, I'm gonna be the Barndo guy, but like, that's not what I do. Like, I build, and there was a moment where I was like, I made a post on it because it hit me in the middle of the night. I was like, I build people. My people build amazing barndominiums.
That's rad.
But I build people.
Yeah.
I care about people at a level because I know what it feels like to be an unappreciated, productive member of a team. And that, for me, I've had the blessing to sit and with my focus on people since the beginning of this company to today. And it's just that is translated over. And like, I've got that crazy, psychopath entrepreneur gene to where
I got it too.
Yeah, it's fun. People don't understand it.
No.
You know, other entrepreneurs do, but even in a room of entrepreneurs, there's some dudes in there. You're like, man, you lost your mind. But that's okay. Like, I'm sure they view me the same way, and so there's levels to it for sure. But that moment was like, who am I? Like, that's what I'm. That is it. I build people.
I love that.
And it was life transformative. Like, so much anxiety in my life, so much things that I struggled with. So it was all identity crisis.
Yeah.
It was all identity crisis because all I ever thought was like, make money, be successful, but like, it's not possible.
No, and I get that. I get that thought a lot from my network is I come across sometimes I think like I've got it figured out, which I don't. But I just try to be confident when I get out there because I think it's important to choose that route. I'm not a confident person by nature at all. I really am not. I think that's probably why I was an editor, because I could hide in my shell a little bit for a while. But I don't know. It's really important to not like to give yourself the grace to figure out your route, especially in your 20s when you're just figuring it out, like you said. But the purpose thing is so important, and I would die for that. I mean, that's the thing that gets me going every day, is like that I can help put other people's story forward like that, or that I could hopefully make an impact in some way. And you have to make that impact. Like you said, you have to make that thing come around for you to help other people. It's not you're waiting around for a call. And that's the thing that drives me nuts about the film industry is people are complaining like crazy right now during all these strikes that have been happening out west. And I've got buddies that live in LA right now that are freaking killing it because they don't give a rip about any of that stuff. They say, I know what I need to do. Like, they just have this feeling that they have to do something. I'm going to go chase it. And if you try to hold me back, I won't work with you. And that's where we're at nowadays. That's the world we live in post-COVID, I feel like now. And I say that all the time because I really do think it made a huge impact on where everybody's at. But that allowed and opened the door, and I hope inspired a lot of people that are coming out of college now or have come out of college, that they can go and do what they want to do. And it might not be college either. That's the other thing. I'm glad I got my bachelor's, but I don't really, it's in communication, so I hope I use it, but I didn't really learn anything from that. I mostly learned from just being out there and doing things. So I hope that people feel that they can go chase those things once they do, like, allow themselves to, well, I guess chase purpose, right? Chase what your purpose is, because then the fiscal side of that lines up at some point, and it really does. And you figure out ways. For me, I've got, 4 businesses right now. I've figured a way to where I can run a post-production house and have a whole team for that. Contract team. I could be a director or producer on my own and go do jobs. I can run a rental company and I can run this TEDx thing. I figured out how to do all of that just because it's a different branch of who I am. And I hope people can see that too. It doesn't just have to be I'm an editor only, or I'm a, whatever in the industry. So that's what I would say to that.
Dude, what an incredible conversation. I'm so glad you came and hung out and
thanks.
Got this opportunity to just dive into that, because it's like worlds apart but the same humans, you know?
Exactly, bro.
And I think that's what people need to see, is like, it's not hard to find people you can collaborate with and do life with and grow with, because in the small circle of the small percentage of people that are actually out here changing things, they're all running off of the same premise.
Mm-hmm.
It's a passion and it's a purpose. And dude, what great show. I appreciate you, man. Let me ask you this. If people want to find you online or connect or look up some of your work, what's the best way for them to do that?
evanrogers.co is my spot. My website that has pretty much everything, my bio, a lot of my work. My Instagram's Evan M. Rogers. And those are like my 2 mains pretty much. But I'm at TEDx Unity Park. All that stuff's all connected there, so you can find it there.
That's awesome, man. Well, appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you.